folks. Welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. So great to be with you. Big week for Republicans. I mean, the last 2 weeks for Republicans and President Trump, we are blessed that President Trump is still alive, clearly. All of this leading momentum, though, for President Trump, even his speech last night, talking about the event of nearly being assassinated, I think was a powerful moment. It shows you a different side of President Trump. And then his speech last night going in and talking about all the issues that America faces. I do want to specifically talk about China. I want to talk about J.D. Vance as well. I've got a theory here that the timing of J.D. Vance being ultimately picked, I mean, we know we had to make a pick before the convention, but J.D. Vance and then Elon Musk offering up $45 million a month until the election. Elon Musk, a huge fan of J.D. Vance. Why? J.D. Vance is a huge China hawk. He has pushed back against the CCP. J.D. Vance is right there about taking the fight to the Chinese Communist Party. That plays into what Elon Musk would want, a guy like Peter Thiel, tech entrepreneur, what they would want. And I almost think there may be a split in Silicon Valley, just like there's a split in the Democrat Party, where you have half of Silicon Valley saying, you know what, we've got to rein China in. They've got us under the thumb. And then another half of Silicon Valley that is literally just sucking up to the Chinese Communist Party. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, a few others that are now showing support for President Trump. I think a lot of that has to do with President Trump's views on China and making sure we rein in China's, the CCP's aggression. So we're going to talk about some of that. J.D. Vance on the program today with the new federal state of China, who knows all about this kind of stuff. So with that, folks, let's get the party started.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, welcome, everybody. Our guest today is Ayla Wang with the new federal state of China, the organization aimed at taking down the CCP. Ayla, welcome to the program.
Grant, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on. First off, I guess let me just ask you, President Trump made a couple mentions of China yesterday. He didn't make the whole speech on China. It was an hour and a half. But what did you think overall about President Trump's speech?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the target and focus on China's issues is very essential for the next presidency. The problem here today is that, you know, in the past few years that we've seen CCP's aggression over America through fentanyl, through virus, through all of these, through all of these dumpings on products and the overall, the productions overseas in China. All of these things are actually harming the economy of the United States. I think that President Trump, in his further campaigns, he will address more on his tactics and strategies if he will re-elect as, president of the United States against the Chinese Communist Party.
It's funny because in the title of this, I called J.D. Vance a big tech plant willing to take the fight to China. Sounds negative, but it's not negative. I do believe Donald Trump Jr. played a big role in selecting J.D. Vance. I do believe that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and some of these big tech entrepreneurs who know how important it is to rein in China may have had a say, at least some input. I know they're not calling it, they're not buying J.D. Vance the vice presidency, but you offer up $45 million a month, you're going to get some input into this. I think they would want a guy like J.D. Vance. Would you agree?
Well, I think Elon Musk's support to President Trump is very interesting to me. For me, it could be a signal or a sign from Elon Musk to support Trump's, views against the Chinese Communist Party. But my confusion here is that Tesla still has the biggest factory that was under construction in China, and lots of Tesla and business has been ongoing with the Chinese government, and many of these Tesla data has been surrendered to CCP as well. On the other hand, if we look at X that was currently now controlled and operated by Elon, that Elon Musk still hired people who have worked with national security of the Chinese Communist Party, such as Li Feifei, to work in his company. So I would say lots of positive signs has has been showing that more and more business and entrepreneurs are now opposing the Chinese Communist Party. But on the other hand, I think, deep down inside, I think CCP's involvement, is still in place.
So it's interesting because you are correct that Elon Musk and Tesla are, look, Tesla, as you mentioned, has a huge plant in China. My assessment of this could be that China is also producing electric vehicles as well at a record pace. President Trump talked about putting 100% tariff on some of these vehicles. China is the competition to Elon Musk. Maybe he's willing to sacrifice some of the business in China, even with that plant there, in order to rein in China's EV production. Because if you put 100% tariff on China's electric vehicles coming in, nobody's buying a Chinese electric vehicle here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, to sacrifice a Chinese market and opposing against the CCP is a courageous decision to any of these business, owners. And the major problem here is that the biggest, Tesla plant in China was actually helping the CCP to obtain technology from Elon. That's, where the concerns have, because, to be honest, I don't think that the Chinese government has its ability to develop its own EV cars. Many of these technologies and data and modeling were actually, obtained from experience that they have worked with Tesla.
Yeah, fascinating. Let's go through some of it. I want to play President Trump first, and then we'll go through J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is an important component of this, of at least America continuing what President Trump started. We got a pause under Joe Biden, but J.D. Vance is important about continuing President Trump's quest to rein in the CCP. But this is President Trump, some brief remarks about China and how it relates to Iran and Iran's strengthening under Joe Biden.
Congressman who is a Democrat say, well, whether you like him or not, Iran was broke dealing with Trump. I told China and other countries, if you buy from Iran, we will not let you do any business in this country, and we will put tariffs on every product you do send in of 100% or more. And they said to me, well, I think that's about it. They weren't going to buy any oil. And they were ready to make a deal. Iran was going to make a deal with us. And
so it's interesting, Ayla, because this is President Trump's literally philosophy when it comes to foreign policy, is you pit everybody else against each other and get America out of the way here. Don't be buying oil from Iran. Now you cut off the money to Iran. They're broke. And they can't be funding Hamas. They can't be funding protests in the United States and all of these other things. Your thoughts?
Well, I think, we have been aware, or at least the New Federal State of China and Mr. Miles Guo, the founder of the New Federal State of China, has been warning the world that CCP's support in Iran has been decades long. That if you look at, China's banks, named as Kunlun Bank, Kunlun Bank was one specialized bank to support Iran's, oil trades and currency exchange. And so if we look at that, CCP was not only just purchasing oil from Iran, CCP was also using financial institutions to facilitate such transactions and to facilitate the currency exchange, with the oil. So if we're saying that, Trump, President Trump's, strategy is to raising up the tariffs to 100%, we're also, the other side of it is that we need to look at the sanctions on CCP's related, financial institutions to support Iran. Remember, as the moment we speak, the Chinese Communist Party was also helping Russia to use its own banks because the United States has imposed, very strong financial sanctions against Russia because of the Russia war. So I would absolutely, support a strong tactics and strategies against the CCP's, fake and bubble economy. But on the other hand, I think direct sanctioning on the financial institutions, that was facilitate CCP support to Iran was also important.
Yeah, I think you're correct. And CCP, I know they have so much power, and I know we need them for so much, but they also need us, which is why we have a lot of power over them, which it seems this administration is failing to exert. President Trump did exert that power. Would you agree that we do have some economic power over China?
Oh, absolutely. Remember that, ever since China opens its doors to the world, it was investments from the West to improve and strengthen the economy in China. if we look at all of the investment opportunities, that actually enrich the Chinese people and enrich the Chinese Communist Party, it was the investment, from the Wall Street, from BlackRock, Blackstone, from from Manhattan. It was all of these investments from Europe, from Switzerland, that enriched the Chinese Communist Party in the past few decades. So, overall, I think the United States did have, a decisive power in impacting CCP's economy. But the truth is that, in the very last few years, the Chinese Communist Party was able to do, huge acquisitions over groups, over investments groups. If you look at Hainan Airline groups, CCP made it from a mere airline group to an investment group, and to acquire all of these investment projects in overseas in the West. And with these fake banknotes that created by the Chinese Communist Party and its proxies, with the CCP was able to drag down U.S. economy just through its fake bubble economy. So I think, it's a chemistry being like the two now are emerged. And, each party might feel that they have a decisive power over another. But in turn, I think, the power has been merged together.
Yeah. I think you're correct on that, obviously. I want to go to J.D. Vance now. And he addressed the Republican convention this week. I thought he gave a great speech. A very likable guy, by the way. I think this was a good pick from President Trump. It's going to be hard for the left to despise him. For everybody out there who don't know, J.D. Vance wrote Hillbilly Elegy. It's about working class America, growing up basically as a hillbilly with a drug-addicted mother. His grandmother raises him. And he was the hero to the left. Those on the left loved this book and the movie that came out on Netflix, and now all of a sudden he becomes a Republican. They despise this guy, but he's a likable guy. But for our purposes, he also has a keen focus on China and the problems with the CCP. So this is J.D. Vance at the convention.
Never in my wildest imagination could I have believed that I'd be standing here tonight. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio. A small town where people spoke their minds, built with their hands, and loved their God, their family, their community, and their country with their whole hearts. But it was also a place that had been cast aside and forgotten by America's ruling class in Washington. When I was in the 4th grade, a career politician by the name of Joe Biden supported NAFTA, a bad trade deal that sent countless good jobs to Mexico. When I was a sophomore in high school, that same career politician named Joe Biden gave China a sweetheart trade deal that destroyed even more good American middle-class manufacturing jobs. When I was a senior in high school, that same Joe Biden supported the disastrous invasion of Iraq, and at each step of the way, in small towns like mine in Ohio or next door in Pennsylvania or Michigan, in states all across our country, jobs were sent overseas and our children were sent to war. And
Joe, let's go. Okay, so in the end, what he's saying is we've got to stop sending manufacturing jobs overseas, and particularly to China or south of the border, in particular to Mexico and other South and Central American countries. I agree with him on all of this. The bottom line is if we could bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States and get less reliant on China, this begins the process of decoupling from the CCP, Ayla.
Exactly. But I do foresee lots of challenges in moving the manufacturing from China to the United States. People purchase goods from China because of the low price, right? Because of a very cheap price. And the cheap price comes with the price of underpaid, laborers, of underpaid, of underage laborers in China. And all of these issues are essential problems here in the United States. The reason that the Chinese Communist Party had an advantage in price was because no one cares about the labor issues in China. And that was a complete different scenario in the United States. So when policymakers, when Vance, advocated for moving manufacturing jobs from China to the United States, the problem is that, by only increasing tariffs or by only moving the factories from China to the United States, will not directly resolve the pricing issues. The problem here is that the CCP will still be able to have a way to set up factories in other countries, meaning in Vietnam or in other Asian countries, in the name of the factories are now replacing its location from China to other countries. But in fact, that the controller or the owner or the same labor issue problems will still be caused or linked to the Chinese Communist Party. So if we look at the manufacturing issues right here, I think that echoes with CCP's essential strategies in the past few decades. They want to change the structure of the United States production. By holding your manufacturing, they would be able to manipulate your market.
Yeah. And so, again, getting back to what J.D. Vance says, this is all about returning all of this to America. And until we do that, all of the things that you're spelling out, China will just continue to prosper at the expense of Americans. Would you agree?
Exactly. At the expense of Americans, at the expense of hardworking Chinese citizens as well. Yeah. Because remember, when they're producing goods, they're not being paid very well. Lots of the laborers are underwaged without even reporting to, local government. And many of these laborers has been very, very cheap. And they have been, living in a condition where air pollution, water pollution, and food pollution exists everywhere. They have been sacrificing, their bodies in order to produce cheap goods for the CCP.
Let me play for you another clip. This was J.D. Vance when he was on with Fox News Sunday, talking about China, talking very similar about what we're talking about and what he just mentioned at his acceptance speech. But take a listen to this.
And some of the very people who shipped America's manufacturing base overseas to China in the first place, who weakened our ability to manufacture our own weapons, are now the same people who saying we can get involved in 3 wars at once. The math doesn't make sense. We're stretched too thin. We've got to focus. And the last point I'll make on this is if we focus on East Asia, if we focus on containing the Chinese, the Europeans can step up in Europe. Germany still, after Donald Trump demanded it, still doesn't spend 2% of GDP on defense. A lot of the NATO countries have allowed their own industrial might to atrophy. So why are Americans subsidizing European security? We should be focused on our own problems, and that's mostly China.
All right. So in many respects, it sounds a lot like President Trump because, yes, he's focused on China. But it's not just us to focus on as well. Europe has to do its part. All these other nations that are so reliant on the United States also have to do their part, Ayla.
Absolutely. And I felt fascinated that Vance actually speak about the 3 wars together, because that's one of the CCP's core strategy, that CCP is betting on the United States will not be able to resolve 3 wars at the same time. And this was exactly, what Vance was talking about. And I think that he was correct. United States should focus on itself, to resolve the essential issues against the Chinese Communist Party. If you resolve the issues with the Chinese Communist Party, the rest issues will be very easy, for you to look at the nature of the problems. And today, as the election approached, I think CCP's involvement and interfere and CCP's aggression will be stronger and stronger to distract the United States and to further intervene into the results of the election. Yeah,
I think you're correct on that. I mean, look, the bottom line is they interfere with everything. I mean, and it does nothing surprises me. I mean, even today, look what we're looking at. We're looking at these airline situations that is totally. So all the airlines are shut down, basically. You've got banks shut down. You've got emergency response situations shut down. They're saying it's a software glitch with CrowdStrike and Microsoft Windows. But I don't believe anything anymore. I don't. When Southwest went down, I was worried that was a cyber hack. They said no. It seems like all of these things are happening more and more often. I guess we can take them at their word that it's a cyber attack, but in the end, I'm not sure I necessarily believe it because China's aggression, certainly, I would not put anything past them of doing something like this. Ayla, would you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, with all of the CCP's aggressive tools and technology in monitoring phones of policymakers and president's candidates, all of these could be, easily mastered by the Chinese Communist Party to obtain information and data and to analyze and to react with, new strategies coming out from the Chinese Communist Party. Cyber attacks are very, very common. You look at New Federal State of China, you look at, Mile School, all of the disinformation campaigns takes place at all times. So I would assume that the same will apply to all of the presidency candidates.
Yeah. Let me play one more clip for JD Vance. This is on Face the Nation, talking about China. Here we go.
On this question, Europe and China and the intertwinement between those two. Look, the reason Europe has become weaker is because they've deindustrialized. And why have they deindustrialized? Because they pursued a green energy agenda following the lead of the Biden administration, and that necessarily empowers China and Russia. We need to acknowledge that it's our decisions that are making these countries stronger. We need to fix that, not whine at countries that have 10 million people.
Or people just like cheap stuff no matter where they live, right? So they look for cheaper providers.
Well, they'd love to have cheap energy in Europe, and they don't have it because of the policies of the green energy lobby.
I want to ask.
So it's interesting. Margaret Brennan raises an interesting point. I don't trust her. She's a total leftist. But people do love cheap stuff. And it is not a secret, Ayla Wang, with the New Federal State of China, that we get stuff cheaper from China than in many respects than we can make it here. And I believe that is in large part because of Democrat policies. When you look at industries being overrun with unions and holding business owners hostage for the price of wages going up and everything surrounding the workforce. When you look at energy and refusing to drill, sending the price of everything up, and up. When you look at the over-regulatory process of American government and what it puts and requires of American businesses, it makes it very hard to compete. Forget about what China's doing. And I mean, look, I don't want to forget, but forget about what China's doing. We're killing ourselves here. And sometimes I wonder, like, how do we even focus on China yet? We got to get our own house in order, Ayla.
Right. I think that was exactly correct. With all of the issues that we've already observed in this country, I think business owner does have a very, a narrow path in strengthening its own business and expanding, its operations. To be honest, in China, it's the same. But the difference is that in China, business owners use bribery, to expand their paths, so that some of the business owners were able to expand their operations or able to profit from their own business. But that's the difference in the United States. The problem here today is that all of the cheap goods that people like and people purchase in supermarkets today and that were produced in China, that was on the sacrificing, of all of these unpaid laborers and forced labor. Some of them might even, be living in Xinjiang concentration camps as well. And so if we look at that, on the one hand, that we want to be politically correct. We want to be taking more actions against the Xinjiang concentration camp, against the massacre that the CCP had committed. On the other hand, we have been importing these cheap goods, from China, and that will also strengthen CCP's ability to, to expand its powers and to expand its factories to have more unpaid laborers and underage laborers. So I think, overall, I think decoupling is still very essential on making effective policies by knowing, what the CCP has been doing to its own citizens was also very important, because it was not the only, it's not an easy solution just to move factories from China to United States. It's also to understand the logic and the tactics of the Chinese Communist Party. They have been implementing against the United States for decades, and they've managed to do that. And that was for a reason, because CCP understands the system of the United States. They've already found weak points and utilized these weak points to conduct a fake economy against this country.
Yeah, they sure have. And they're doing it in many respects with some success, which is what's really sad. So how do we get to this point? I'm going to play you a little montage of Joe Biden. And he's typical of many politicians that embrace China over the years. And I'm going to play this for you and then offer up, I think we need to get away from this mentality.
China is not our enemy.
I believe then, and I'm even more convinced now, that a rising China is an incredibly positive development for not only China, but the United States and the rest of the world. It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. China is a great nation, and we should hope for the continued expansion. We want to see China rise. A rising China can be a significant asset for the region and the world. China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks, but guess what? They're not they're competition for us. China's not our problem. We can help them with some of their problems. China's not a problem. The idea that China is going to eat our lunch is bizarre. And so,
I mean, it's so delusional unless he knows he's lying, because he's been on the take, and his family and hunters and all the business deals and everything, which I think plays into this. I know you guys don't get into the political game on this, but I would have you comment on China's not going to eat our lunch. Well, China's been eating our lunch, and unless we do something about it, they'll continue to eat our lunch, Ayla.
Right, Grant. I think a subtle but very important difference is that China or Chinese people does not want to eat American people's lunch. But the only thing is that the CCP is eating our lunch every single day, and that was 100% certain and sure. You know, the plans of taking of conducting economy policies and creating and being more aggressions militarily against the United States has been set up since decades ago. Ever since the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party. And so I think the main ideology, no matter who sits in Beijing and make decisions for the Chinese Communist Party, the essential value of the CCP and the essential goal of the Chinese Communist Party has never been shifted. And so the problem here is that most Chinese people want a peaceful and friendly relationship with the United States. If we look at, a more advanced cities or more international city in China, many of these cities has been very friendly to foreigners and to people who come from Western countries. And back in the old days when China, first opened its doors, seeing American people in China means prosperity, means opportunities, means better life, hopes for better life. And today it remains the same. Most Chinese people want to build a very peaceful, friendly business relationship, professional diplomatic relationship with the United States. And with that being said, it has never changed. But the only problem is that the CCP had kidnapped its own citizens. The CCP has utilized its policies, its factories, dominating the currencies by pushing out its 3F plans, importing fentanyls to United States, by dragging down U.S. economies, and by sending back propaganda back to the Chinese citizens, saying that now the United States are opponents of China. And this is where we need to be very, very serious, and we need to be very careful, because ultimately Chinese people are victims of the Chinese Communist Party. And if we ask for Chinese people, lots of Chinese people would support President Trump for a stronger reaction against the CCP. This is where Chinese people want. We want a peaceful and friendly relationship with all Americans in the United States.
Well, I think it's safe to say, like the American people, the Chinese people have a streak of entrepreneurship in them as well that I think is being squashed for the everyday person that's not associated with the Chinese Communist Party. I think they long for freedom and would love to have freedom. And, even tourism to China now. I'm not going to China. I can't go. I would be worried I'd be arrested. And I think you got a lot of businessmen who also feel that way. And I think they're American citizens who would love to vacation and sightsee in China. And that is all but going away too. It really, none of this is going to be fixed until the Chinese Communist Party is beaten back and destroyed. And I know that is the goal of the new federal state of China. And any way we can help do that, because freedom needs to happen all across the world. That's for sure. Ayla Wang, it is so great to have you on. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you coming in today.
Grant, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Stinchfield. Don't forget, GrantStinchfield.com is the website, GrantStinchfield.com, Stinchfield1776 on all the social media platforms. Sign up for the email list. That way I can keep in touch with you. God forbid anything happens. And we will see you tonight on the Real America's Voice program, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you see me there. Stinchfield's Army rolls. Thanks to all of you. Have a great day, folks.